So I'm going to start with a photograph of when I was in kindy. So this is 4-year-old Belle. She's pretty intense, actually, now that I look at it. But I grew up in the country, a small country town. I was super shy, and in actual fact, I still am in lots of ways. I just used to sit back and observe the world. My best friend was my cousin Prudence, who was 3 months older than me. And I spent most of my weekends being dragged around to my older sibling's sport. Life was pretty good. So my mum was quite ill when I was really young. So I spent a lot of time on the farm with Dad just doing farmy things. So I can remember having my afternoon nap in the wool in the shearing shed. When I think about it now, I can feel the sun on my back just being out in the paddock cleaning troughs. Or the excitement when Dad used to put the ute in first gear and jump on the back and put out the hay, and I thought I was driving the ute. My dad was my safe place. You know those people in your life where you don't actually have to say anything, just being together is enough. He made the world less scary, and life just felt right. It's amazing how people can do that to us, just their presence. I'm going to show you another photo. Now, I will say I've only got school photos to show you because I'm the 4th child. And I'd also like to note that that haircut was very on trend in 1986. Yeah, it is back actually. When I look at 10-year-old Belle, I feel really sad. Because when I look in her eyes, I see pain, struggle, and isolation. I distinctly remember coming back from Adelaide with Mum and Dad and a conversation in the car that went something like this. Are we going to tell everyone about the cancer diagnosis? So my dad had just been diagnosed with lung cancer. And because they were community-orientated people, they sort of decided, this conversation went back and forth, they decided, yes, we will tell everyone, just so the small town gossip doesn't get out of hand. And people will be open with it and people will know what's going on. So what then happened was we go into the general store. You know, like I lived in one of those towns where there's like 3 shops. But everyone left because we came in. We'd walk down the street and people would cross the road rather than talk to us. And when they did talk to us, there was that feeling that they couldn't wait to get out of there. And so for me as a 9-year-old, I was completely isolated. No one was acknowledging what was happening. By this stage, all of my siblings were at boarding school. My best friend, Prudence's family, they'd moved to Adelaide as well. Mum and Dad spent a lot of time in Adelaide because he needed to have treatment. So I was pretty alone. There was even a fellow student, who said to me, we need to be nice to you now because your dad's going to die. Not a very useful thing to have said to you when then mistrusting what was happening in the world. So the only way I could speak about this was through art. So I used to do little doodles all the time, and I still actually do them when I'm needing the world to be shut out. So if you're in a meeting with me, I'm doodling, don't worry, it's okay. I also used to write poetry to express what I was feeling, to talk about the stuff that no one wanted to talk about. And also used to do drawings to try and make sense of what was happening because no one was talking about it. And that's the power of using creativity to process what's happening for you. Now, there's another photo. The teenage years, weren't they wonderful for all of us? So this is a photo of me in year 8. I went to boarding school. So I went from a small country town of 80 students to living with 100 other girls in a school that had about 700 people. I even had to wear a blazer to school every day. So different. But that wasn't the only thing that was different. So our first weekend, it's called an exit, those of you who know about boarding houses, where you get to go home for the weekend. That was approaching. So it was about 3 weeks into this new change. And the nun came and got my sister and I from breakfast. Said, you need to pack your bags, you're going home early. And I was really excited. I was like, oh wow, we get to go home early. That's really great. Until I pulled up at the farm and realised why. Dad died the following morning. And that has shaped what I do now, based on the way people reacted to that. So I never forget returning to school a day or so after the funeral and walking out to this courtyard and all of these people coming at me. So they were hugging me, they were making a fuss of me, they were completely over the top. And I didn't even know who they were. And they were being super nice to me. I always get sus when people are super nice to me. But that also stopped. And I went back to feeling alone. A couple of years later, I was at boarding school and I had a problem with one of the boarding house supervisors. So I was trying to communicate that. And I was told that if you had a problem with this, put it in writing. Now, big life lesson, don't do that. Mum was called for a special meeting the next day because I was very honest in my communication, which is I like to keep things real. And what happened was in that meeting, for my punishment and my out-of-character behaviour, I was sent to a psychologist. I never forget walking into that room and there was this friendly man, and he seemed really old at the time, but now he was probably my age now. He had grey hair and he sat behind this big wooden desk with the leather insert in it. And once Mum left the room, he just leant over and he asked me one question. And I wish I could remember what that question was, because it'd be very handy as a therapist now. Because for the next hour, I talked and talked and talked and cried for the first time since Dad was diagnosed. I get really emotional about that, and actually I didn't know whether I'd be able to say it out loud here today. Because that's the power of being heard, acknowledged, and having space held for you. It was like the first time someone actually asked me how I was. And it's really powerful. And I would have just been like any other client. But that's a significant thing that has shaped my purpose. Because through the experiences of not being acknowledged, not being heard, and not having space held for me, life looks very different. So you may think that this is just Belle's childhood story, but in actual fact, I could have told you thousands of these examples for myself and those that I see one-on-one in staff wellbeing workshops and in trainings. The way people react to things has an influence on what we hide, what we speak about, what shapes us, all of those things. And whether you have stress, burnout, life happens. Let's not deny that. But what I found really interesting in my experiences is, on one hand, people underdid it. They felt awkward. They didn't know what to do, so they vanished, which had me feeling completely isolating, and that is completely having people left on their own. But then if we think about the opposite, when people overdo it, it's rescuing, it's fix it, let me take that from you. And it's completely overwhelming and disempowering. And just like what Vicky said this morning, it really struck me when she talked about walking alongside each other. But wouldn't it be great if we found that medium and were able to be with another when they're experiencing big life events?